The year had begun auspiciously for Martin Schwartz. His practice was thriving like never before. Suddenly, everyone wanted to get divorced. Media attention began to come his way. In the second week of January, Shoreline magazine featured him on its cover under the headline, Top Long Island Lawyers. The photograph, a torso shot taken with the camera angled slightly upward, captured him girded for battle, his arms folded across his chest, his mouth a taut line, his eyes coldly appraising an unseen opponent. The accompanying profile lauded him as the man you wanted on your side, if your plans for the coming year included a divorce and custody litigation. Initially, he thought he came off well. Rereading the article, however, he began to have some doubts, which crystallized when his wife, Julia, flipping through the pages at the breakfast table one Sunday morning, read some of his more provocative quotes back to him. "Marty Schwartz will go to war for you. Really? You sound like a bully. Well, it's a good thing you didn't read it before you married me. Now you're stuck. It's not as funny as you think." Pushing the magazine aside, she gathered up the plates and the cups and deposited them in the sink. In an interview with a reporter from Newsday, Martin, no longer Marty, tried to show himself in a more gentle light. "When clients come to me, the first thing I ask them is whether they're sure they want to get divorced. Are they sure the relationship can't be fixed? This may sound strange coming from a divorce lawyer, but I believe in marriage. I believe that it's love and our obligations to those we love and who love us that keep us centered and give us a reason to live. It may cost me some business that way, but I sleep well at night." "Do I sound too sappy?" he asked Julia. "The sentiments are fine. You can sound very caring when you want to. Now try to live up to your words for a change."
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds, and I'm here with Edward Belfar, author of A Sad Case, which we had the privilege of publishing in our second issue of For Page and Screen magazine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Of course. Now, just to start, could you give us a little blurb about a blurb of what A Sad Case is all about?
It's about this man named Martin Schwartz, who is a divorce lawyer, and as the story begins, he's having things are looking up for him, at least professionally. He's having a lot of success. The divorce business is booming, and he's begun to attract some attention from news media. First, some local publications. He lives on Long Island in New York, and he's getting attention from some prominent local media outlets there. One, the name of one of them I just made up. Newsday is a real paper. The magazine is made up. And then he gets a call to do a guest spot on CNN about a sensational divorce case involving a young pop singer who has all kinds of, has a rather sensational custody and divorce litigation episode on. This pop star has drug problems, and she's been in rehabilitation. That's like a lot of cases, people read about. And he goes on TV, does a spot, and it's a successful spot. He talks about how this pop star needs to kind of do the things she needs to do to convince the judge that she's capable of taking responsibility for herself and her kids, getting into rehab and listening to her lawyers. And the spot goes well, and people congratulating him for it. And so that's how the story begins. And then he refers to her case as a sad case. But there's some, as we find out, it's a story developed. There's some irony, of course, in that title, because while he is having a lot of success professionally, not everything in his own life is going so well. And so after work, after leaving the studio and after work, he goes to visit his daughter, who is a teenager who's in a psychiatric ward, who has an eating disorder. And we find out that is, he and she are estranged, and he tries to tries to make conversation with her, but he cannot. She is angry at him. And so that's kind of a hard thing for him to deal with. And so she rebuffs him, and he goes home and watches a little bit of the news. And this is at the very beginning of the pandemic. The story is set in winter, and he's sees somebody from the administration come on TV and trying to assure people that the stock market will be fine, and this is no big deal, this pandemic. It's not going to amount to anything. And actually, that coverage of the disease is then soon eclipsed by, again, that coverage of the trial of the pop star, which gets higher on the news. And while he's at home, he gets a call from his wife, and we find out that she's in New Jersey because she had her parents are elderly and frail, her father in particular, and he has had a fall, and her mother was helpless to deal with the situation, so she had to go driving all the way up to New Jersey, out to New Jersey from Long Island, and to try to deal with the situation. And the father is now in the hospital as a result of the fall, and she's staying there, and she's upset about the whole business. And we've already gotten some indication of tension in the marriage. In the initial scenes, we were in the dialogue between the two of them, and now it develops that she feels that, this the task of dealing with her frail elderly parents is basically all on her, and she feels like she's not getting a lot of help from him, and she blames him for that. And so this dialogue is kind of tense and uneasy, and it ends, from his point of view, not very satisfactorily. He's trying to offer reassurance, but he's not able to. His words sound hollow. And so that's the conversation ends that way. And he goes out because he doesn't feel like hanging around the house, because the house is empty and it seems very desolate to him. He goes out to get a drink, and it's snowing out, and because he's cold, he stops in a dive bar that he ordinarily would not stop in. And he orders a drink, and he has a hard time getting the bartender's attention. And then there's a woman in the bar who's a regular, and they to talking. She comes over to him, and they get to talking, and whether one picks up the other, they're both showing, I guess she's probably greater interest in him. And so he they have some drinks together and they're both kind of drunk, and he walks outside with her into the snow, and it's she obviously wants to go home with him, but he's ambivalent about that because he does, his marriage is not in good shape, but he still does feel, as we've seen through the story, he does feel, attached to his wife. But then they kind of stumble against each other in the snow beside her car, and he kisses her, but then he draws back because he is not ready to go through with something like that. And she gets angry because she's had her frustrations before with other married men. She berates him for that. He's is not able to make a defense of himself because he recognizes his um, duplicity and hypocrisy. And then she drives off and leaves him in the snow. And she there's a railroad crossing where the crossing barrier starts to lower, and she goes through it, and he closes his eyes because he's worried that he's going to hit her, but it doesn't. The train passes, and then she's gone, and then he starts walking back home in the blizzard, and that's where the story ends.
Great, great. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting story. One of the things that struck me about it is this duality between his perspective on other people and their struggles and their sad cases, and then our outside perspective on his situation. And I love the balance that you strike there. It's fantastic. So what inspired this story? What led you to write it?
In part, it grew out of the novel that I've been working on, that I have coming out in a couple of months, which is and just a part of it that also is about a character who has some aspirations toward fame. In his case, he's a doctor, but a crooked one. So he's an anti-addiction doctor who is actually involved in drug trafficking himself, and so his personal life is a mess also. But there, so that was at least the first part of the story, and there were other parts of it that were part of a longer story, actually, that I wrote a long time ago, like about 20 years ago, and which featured a couple of the parts, but they were different, and the character was a little different and probably less sympathetic. In that instance, he was a lawyer who was obsessed with winning, and that had driven his wife away and put her away. Here, he still has that duality which I wanted to explore between the professional expertise and his chaotic life, and that that was what I guess was the theme that I wanted to explore, and also how sometimes things happen that even when there are people, there are couples who mean well, who are not necessarily bad people, but because there can be circumstances that put great strain on a marriage, on a family, in this case, the illness and frailty of the wife's parents. That was an element that was not in that earlier story from 20 years ago, but it was something I had to deal with in the interim. So, and the daughter with the eating disorder. So I wanted to examine how such strains affect people and affect a marriage. And also that theme has fascinated me that it is always so easy, I think, to see, what other people need to do to improve or rescue their lives, and how difficult it is to see what we need to do in our own lives to make our own lots better. And that was I think that's always fascinating me, that split there.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Um, is that line of investigation kind of what brought you to writing, or how did you get involved in writing in general?
Well, I've been doing it for a long time, and I don't think it was that particular theme that brought me to writing, but uh, I started probably way back in college or in high school, and uh, interesting question. It's something I just felt drawn to do, I guess, without one something I found that I was good at, and also uh, so what brought me to writing is, I guess, it's a way of kind of imagining a world that you could shape in the way you'd like, and that appealed to me because real life can be pretty shapeless, I guess, and frustrating. And I try to capture life to some degree, but not um, not in the sense of a photograph, I guess, but to understand why people act the way they do, why I act the way I do myself. Sometimes to put people in certain situations and see what happens in my own mind, where the situation goes and how the characters react. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's it's kind of it gives you an opportunity to shape a world, I guess, um, and to sometimes give voice to people who don't have a voice, maybe to record some aspect of a life that would otherwise be lost. So there are a lot of things that have drawn me to it, and just the uh, the challenge of expressing things precisely, of crafting sentences, of describing things correctly. It can also be like solving a puzzle or problem. And I enjoy that aspect of it too.
Absolutely. I love all of those aspects. One thing I've always found very interesting about writing is it's a way to build connection between people from so many different backgrounds. Like you're talking
Mhm.
about how to describe things precisely and accurately. there's only very few ways you can describe something that will evoke the emotion you want from
Mhm.
hundreds of people out in the
Yeah.
world. And it's fascinating how writers are able to do that. It's one of my favorite little mysteries and puzzles about writing itself. So I love that you bring that up. Um, so you had mentioned earlier in a previous question about your novel. Could you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit more about that?
Yeah. The novel is called A Very Innocent Man, and like A Sad Case, the title is rather ironic in this case because that the protagonist, if you can call him that, maybe more like an anti-hero, is anything but an innocent man. He's somebody who is a doctor. He has a successful practice, but he wants more. He wants to be a television celebrity doctor. And so he goes on TV and he becomes something of an anti-addiction crusader. He talks about the opioid epidemic. At the same time, though, while he's out there, he's actually selling opioid prescriptions for cash. so, so he's doing what he practicing what he preaches against. And eventually it catches up with him. He's gets he has a patient who turns out to be an informant, and he gets arrested by the FBI, and he uh, he goes to court. He actually manages to stay out of jail, except when he's arrested on that day, and then his his legal case is up in the air for a long time, as legal cases tend to be. Um, and but he's not able to practice medicine anymore, and so tries to he casts about for other ways to make a living, and he gets involved in some questionable activities like telemarketing and fraudulent telemarketing with all those scam calls, which provide some of the impetus for that section of the book where he's pretending to be an officer of the law or from Amazon or from Microsoft, telling people that their Windows subscription is being revoked, or they're in trouble with Social Security or Medicare or whatever. And then he decides that maybe he can do better as a motivational speaker. And he has this person he works with, um, who's originally was his kind of coach and helping him get to get some of these bookings. He has a kind of a media coach named yeah, Barry Bullard, who's the subject. Well, and he's sometimes his friend and sometimes his enemy because he kind of jerks the protagonist, or his name is Dr. Robert Rosen, and he kind of gets jerked around by this Barry Bullard some, but he goes to work for him. He has for this company that does kind of uh, this like groups like that are sort of uh, how would you describe it? Um, they're like it's kind of therapeutic, but also involves finance as well. It's it's supposed to teach people how to succeed in every aspect of their lives, their personal and financial lives, but it also is, as it develops, it seems to be kind of a Ponzi scheme because they're also trying to recruit other people, and whoever attends these seminars, they try to get them to recruit other people to attend more of them. And he's uh, he's doing this, and he's recruiting, and he becomes a speaker as well for this group. Um, and he begins to have some success at this as a speaker. Slowly, he's coming along. Initially, as a recruiter, he's not making a great deal of money because you his mentor, his Barry Bullard, is taking all the money. He's at the top of the pyramid, and Dr. Rosen's at the bottom. But he's working his way up to where he's a speaker and a presenter as well. So he's doing better. But his legal case is still hanging in the air, and he has this trial coming up, hearing rather, coming up, a sentencing hearing, but he has pleaded guilty. And he's going to find out whether he has to go to jail or not. And at the same time, while he's doing better, beginning to have some success, he's not quite able to break free of his earlier criminal associations because he was involved with a couple of Russian mobsters while he was doing his opioid selling thing. And they're not finished with him yet. They want to get him involved in another enterprise. And I guess I think it's time to stop there to not give away the ending.
Yes, leave some mystery. And where can we get the book? When is it available?
It's it will be published by Flexible Press. They're a Minnesota-based outfit and small press, and it will be available on June 6th of this year, so just a little less than 2 months. It'll be available from them and the usual retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop. I'll send along links when they're available, certainly.
Awesome. Amazing. Please do. Definitely have to look forward to that. It sounds like there are so many layers. I definitely want to read it. It sounds great. So I guess I feel a little silly asking what's next when we just talked about that. But other than the book, do you have any other projects you're working on, things in the background that you want to talk about?
The book has been the main thing I've been working on. I just finished the final edits for it, and I have some short stories I've collected. Not enough for a full collection at this point, but a chapbook that I've circulated to a few places. I haven't found a home for that one yet. So that's another thing I'm looking at, and working on a short story that maybe will add to that collection, hopefully. And beyond that, I'd like to do something different for my next longer project. I think I was reading recently. I've read some books recently about a couple of periods in American history. One being the McCarthy period of the 1950s, and also the earlier Red Scare period of the late teens and early 1920s. And I think that those periods do bear some resemblance to what we are experiencing now. And so I've thought about maybe possibly setting, I'd like to set a novel in one of those two periods. I just, that's all I have at this point, just the time period, but not the story yet. So that's what I'm thinking now, anyway.
Cool. Well, they both sound interesting. I feel like I haven't heard of a lot of historical fiction from those time periods. So you'd definitely be getting into a fairly untapped market there if you do.
No, I'm drawing a blank on the title, but there's a novel by E.L. Doctorow about that's kind of based on the Rosenberg, the couple who were executed in the 1950s for selling nuclear secrets to the Russians. And so that's one that comes to mind. And I don't know why I'm forgetting the title.
No worries, no worries. Well, it sounds like lots of exciting things. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you with that collection. Hopefully it finds a home soon.
Thank you.
Yes, and I have one more bonus question to kind of surprise you with. Um, so if you could give any piece of advice to writers out there, what would it be?
Well, that's hardly new, but I'm sure they've heard it a million times. But you need persistence and a very thick skin because like this novel, I don't know how many public. I sent queries to a bunch of agents, and I most of them didn't even acknowledge the query. Nothing back from them, even the courtesy of a form letter or reply. And I also carried a lot of independent small presses. There are a lot of them. I haven't counted. I'd rather not. Uh, I think I'd rather not know the total, but it was it could have been 40 or close to 50 or something like that. And I did get some interest. There were a lot of form uh, rejections too. A few that also ghosted me, like the agents. But there were others that showed interest. There was one I was a finalist in one contest, a semifinalist in another, and actually got uh, another offer, but the terms of the contract didn't work out. And well, I guess that's another piece of advice for when if you do get, an offer. I had if you're a member of the Authors Guild, they can help you with contract and legal matters. It's a service they offer for members. I did have someone from there review that contract that I ended up not signing, and I'm glad I did it because it was a really bad contract. So that's a small piece of advice, but the main, uh, back to the main piece of advice, obviously, is just you do have to expect a lot of disappointment and rejection and frustration. And every once in a while, you'll get lucky or just found the right publisher finally who did who to whom this sort of novel, which is a broadly satirical novel, and in that respect, it's somewhat different from the story A Sad Case, which is more tragic, I guess. But I found a publisher who had an affinity for that type of novel, and so that's worked out. But it is a hard thing sometimes to keep going, and I've gotten discouraged a lot of the time, and I have there have been times when I quit for a while and stopped writing and long pauses, but I'm glad I did take it up again. Um, I did have a previous collection of short stories published um, 11 years ago, a collection called Wanderers, which was published by Stephen F. Austin State University Press in 2012. And for a long time, I thought that might be the only book I would ever have published. But I did keep at it. So I did hopefully find some reward with it.
Great. Yeah, I feel like the hardest part is just sticking with it. Like you said,
Yeah.
there's so many pitfalls and roadblocks to
Mhm.
wanting to be published in any form. But
Yeah.
that's fantastic that you stuck with it. I mean, look where it led you. You have a novel. That's amazing. Um, so definitely. Thank you so much for being here, for talking to us. You'll definitely have to send me the link for the novel when it's out so we can link to it. Uh,
Okay, yeah, sure.
yeah, and is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you would like to talk about?
I think so. I thank you again for publishing the story and for interviewing me today. I do certainly appreciate your taking the time to put the story in with me today and allowing me to plug in a little bit too, certainly. So, and I just hope that the readers of the journal will enjoy this interview.
If they're anything like me, I love reading and listening to, watching all author interviews. So thank you very much for, first of all, sending your work. I know when you submitted, it was only our second issue. We were still a very young publication. I mean, we still are. So I appreciate every single author who sends their work to us and kind of taking the chance with us. So I just hope that we've done it justice. And I appreciate you being here for this interview as well, for all of the same reasons. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.